In this video, learn how to create your own 3D world. Well, kind of. We're going to use After Effects along with a little help from Adobe Illustrator to create isometric animations, which look 3D, but they're not actually 3D. Anyways, let's not waste any time and let's get started. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is create our 3D graphics. Just kidding, I have no patience for that, nor would I even do a good job. That's why I pull stock vector graphics like this from the web. My favorite website is freepix.com, in which you can get free isometric graphics like this. However, when you're working with vector files, the first thing you need to do is organize your project in Adobe Illustrator. Or if you have a budget, perhaps you have a graphic designer who will do this step for you, which then very cool. But open your downloaded isometric vector city graphic in Adobe Illustrator. If Illustrator's new to you, don't worry, we're doing very simple stuff here, like here in Cancer. Right away, navigate to the Layers tab and familiarize yourself with the layering of all the objects in your document. We just need to place every object into their own layer so we can properly animate everything in After Effects. For example, if I open the buildings layer, each building is already in its own layer. So I will just move these layers outside of the current layer and delete the now empty buildings layer. Moving forward, if I open the tree layer, I will see groups instead of layers. Since these are groups, I can select the tree layer, click on the 3-line icon, and click Release to Layers Sequence. Now I can move these trees outside of the main layer and delete the now empty tree layer. And while we're at the topic of organization, be sure to delete any graphics you don't want as well. But most importantly, continue this process until every object that you want to animate is in its own layer. The organization of the project file is really the most important part of this entire process, and when you're done with it, you're honestly about 75% done with the entire project. But be sure to save your project as an Adobe Illustrator file and then move over to Microsoft Paint, After Effects. Import your recently saved Illustrator file into After Effects. Be sure the import box is set to composition and click OK. Now go into the composition and there are all your objects layered out. Now you're probably thinking this is going to be a lot of layers to animate, but let's be real. Unless you're working on a super specific project, the majority of the animations will just be a copy and paste. But before you should animate anything, select the pan behind tool and move the anchor points of each layer to the actual object. You'll notice that the anchor point of every layer is by default in the center of your composition. This is no good when it comes to animation, so take a few moments to move the anchor points of every layer so then your object can animate from that point. Okay, now that is done, let's animate this beast. I'll select an object and we'll want to create an overshoot scale animation. Animate the scale of the layer from 0% to 100%, then move to a few frames before your last keyframe and increase the scale to a value higher than 100%. Then lastly, make the first and last keyframes easy ease keyframes by hitting F9 on your keyboard. When done correctly, this will create a really cool overshoot animation. Now we can copy and paste this scale animation to all the other layers, and feel free to animate your objects any way that you need. And a quick tip, be sure to offset your layers so your objects will animate in at different times. So here's what I have so far and it's coming together. Now let's talk about animating these cars to follow the path of the road and loop their animations. What I'll do for this instance is select one of the car layers and grab the pen tool. I'll draw a long straight line like this. Then I'll copy the mask and then paste that data into the position. You may need to readjust the position after copying and pasting it. However, you'll see that the car now follows the road. And we can loop this animation by alt-clicking the stopwatch and apply the loop out open close expression. And playing back through, our car will now loop. And here's the final animation when we repeat this method for everything else. Alright, let's do one last thing to really make this move. Create a null object and then parent all the layers to the null. Then animate the scale and position of the null object to move the composition. This added movement will make a nice difference in your work. And if you want to add additional graphics like these callout animations, be sure to check out our tutorial linked below or save time for our 20,000 plus templates in which you can preview and apply pre-made motion graphics in a single click with the Motion Duck extension. Then you can easily change the graphic to fit your project needs. Be sure to check the links below and always be creative.